FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. Today is 6/19/20. It's Friday. It's a quadruple witching hour on the stock exchange. And I think it's been a quadruple witching hour in the political realm for about 3 years now. And it's only going to get worse. So you better buckle your seatbelts. What are you doing to prepare for the attempted second lockdown 2.0? We want to know. Write to us, kl@kerrylutz.com, kl@kerrylutz.com. Let us know if you want to be on the show and talk about it, talk about your opinion. Well, a great friend of the show, somebody whose show that I watch twice a day on YouTube. And when I don't, I feel like my day is incomplete. I'm talking about Dr. Steve Turley. And Steve, it's so great to have you back on. You know, your daily YouTube blasts are gems. And what always amazes me, you're able to do it, no notes, no nothing. It shows like somebody who can just do stream of consciousness and know what you're going to say before you say it and just get it out so clearly and articulately. How do you do that?
I knew you were going to say that too, so that's the secret. It's a osmosis. I just say the same thing over and over again. Again, it gets easier that way, you know. But in my age now, I'm going to need more notes at this point. But
yeah, my wife used to say that, but it didn't get any easier. So, but hey, you had a financial expert on. I don't remember his name, so forgive me. But he's basically saying the cities are going to crumble to dust. And I've felt that way for a long time. Demographically, we had this little thing of the millennials. Oh, we like to walk to work and, you know, have all this stuff and not need a car and all this great stuff. And I understood it. But I think now the vulnerabilities, the cost structure, the taxation system in these cities, and the lack of police protection, disease, the way it can spread, I think we're going to have a leftist diaspora that's going to go across the nation and maybe across the world.
Yeah, and hopefully they won't be so leftist anymore. That's the idea, right? They see the sum total what happened. Yeah, it might surprise your listeners to know. I mean, our modern day cities, as we understand them, are relatively new. In the beginning of the 19th century, 90% of the population lived in rural areas. Only about 10% were in urban areas. By the end of the 19th century, it reversed. It was 90% in urban areas and only 10% in rural. And what happened was the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution brought mass numbers collectively into city centers unlike ever before. And but we are not so much in an industrial revolution anymore. That ship has sailed, as it were. And now we've moved into, well, Alvin Toffler's calling it a third wave, where we're more of a network society, an internet-based society. We're finding we can work anywhere we want at this point. I think it was Facebook and Twitter that were already telling their employees that for the foreseeable future, they can work from home. They can work from wherever they want. And so what we're seeing now is people who once felt they had to be in cities in order to be in the proximity of these just mass conglomerate, industrialized buildings. They just don't feel like that they have to do that anymore. And they don't. We are now more of a, information-based society as opposed to an industrialized society, although I'm a big fan of the industrial base, no question. But I think our cities now have become much more capable of being able to do business and have employees really, quite frankly, all over the world. And that's flattening out society. It's at least creating the conditions where society could be flattened out, where we can move out from there. And now that you've had the coronavirus, you had the riots, you had all these sort of things, that seems to have been now the straw that broke the camel's back. It's a final impetus for people who were thinking, like you and I were talking about. We both know people personally who were thinking who really thought city life was the greatest thing in the world, and who were maybe toying with the possibility, maybe there's something different. Now they're like, that's it, we're out of here. We don't want anything more to do with this. So I think we're going to see that at levels we haven't seen before.
Yeah, I mean, well, look, when you call the cops and they don't come, which is happening right now in Atlanta, kind of in retaliation for that officer being indicted for felony murder of all things. When you can't rely on the police, then you really got to start looking because nobody, the way our modern society is, even if you're an armed citizen, you can't be thinking about your security 24/7 and ready for them to attack, right? I mean, you got to,
right.
Most people cannot do that. So really, and the filth, the failure of the cities, and they're all run by Democrats. You know, we were talking pre-call, Chicago, the last Republican mayor they had, I think, was when Al Capone was still running the city. And, you know, and every city that you look at, I think some cities like Washington, D.C., never had a Republican mayor. They're all hellholes and they're all failing. And the ones that aren't, well, Minneapolis was considered to be a well-governed, good city that was on the rise, even though that's kind of an oxymoron when a blue mayor or governor is running the state. But even cities like that, I mean, California cities, you see what's happening. It's all over the nation.
That's right. That's right. And it's intensifying sort of the war, as it were, the cold culture war between the rural and the urban, the cosmopolitan and the more traditionalist. And we saw that in the 2016 election. The rurals won. They won big time. I'm actually driving through Pennsylvania right now, and I mean the amount of Trump signs that you see in rural Pennsylvania. I mean it's not even funny. I mean you could build a skyscraper with them. I think. So I was thinking of urbanized area. You know, so it's only intensifying now. People are I don't know if you've seen. I mean, we're going to be talking about this in one of my videos today, but it's in Bethel, Ohio. Small town in Ohio, rural area. 80 Black Lives Matter protesters came out to protest, and they were greeted by 700 armed citizens who said, "Not in our town." And you're starting to see that. You're starting to see rural America. And by the way, they're going to get a nice, big, huge police force as a result of it, because many police are resigning from cities. Yeah. Why be under these? Think about it, Kerry. I mean, you have lawmakers siding with lawbreakers. I mean, just let that hit you, right? Lawmakers are siding with lawbreakers and then throwing law enforcers under the bus. So why would they even consider working in such conditions? So I think we're going to see an intensification of culture war dynamics from this as well.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So, and we're starting to see a backlash. You mentioned it on your videos. I've seen it mentioned by Tim Pool and others, where the people have just said enough. If the cops aren't going to do it, we're going to do it ourselves. We got Bikers for Trump saying they're going to take back Chaz. That should be an interesting confrontation.
That's there. Right, July 4th. That's right.
July 4th of all days to pick, right? There'll be some real fireworks there in Seattle. The only thing that surprised me, Steve, is it hasn't happened sooner.
Right. I think Tucker Carlson he's put his finger on it in the sense that we have to understand there's Black Lives Matter in the latest poll is very popular, around 60% support. Now, I don't know what level of support that is. Would people die for it or something? No, I doubt it. But we have to understand, I think that what's going on is that Americans are very attracted right now to nationalism and its variant forms. And one of the forms is this kind of tribalism, this idea that race is determinative of culture, and therefore if I'm one race, you're another race, and our cultures are inherently incompatible. Believe it or not, Americans are actually getting into that. They're kind of now when we hear rhetoric like that from people in the media, they're only fixated on alt-right, white supremacist, Richard Spencer kind of stuff. But it's actually much, much deeper than that. And I think what you're seeing is, ironically, a strange kind of popularity for that. And so, at this point, Antifa-stan, to the extent that it's kind of caught up in those positive dynamics, it may have had a little bit of an umbrella of public relations success on that. And on the other hand, as the fights start breaking out, as we start seeing the racial segregation that's going on there, it's being forced in there, that's when I think you're going to start to see the civic nationalists, those who want us as a polyethnic nation that is united by border security, economic security, and cultural security. I think that's where you're going to start seeing the backlash. But I think he's had his finger on this. He knows something is up in terms of Black Lives Matter kind of tapping into a sentiment that was growing and that was hidden. And it's under a cultural Marxist veneer. That's what's kind of keeping the left alive right now, is cultural Marxism. But we're finding the cultural Marxist attempt to try to mitigate between all these different, minority groups of the aggrieved and the oppressed. We're finding it's collapsing. Now they're fighting each other. It's actually called interracial hostilities or interracial violence. They're starting to clash with one another. You even have, in a sense, kind of two different factions of Black Lives Matter who are not getting along. So inevitably, I think this whole thing collapses into a kind of tribalism, which would, by the way, kill the left, which is very interesting. Yeah. and then I think that gives a great opportunity for the civic nationalists to stand up and say, we're one nation, we're one people. The nation is a race, one people bound by one flag, one God. And I think that becomes very powerful rhetoric at that point.
You know what it's like. Every year they have this thing in many cities called SantaCon, and people dress up as Santa Claus, and they start this day-long pub crawl. And in the beginning, everyone's happy, everybody's getting along, they're all euphoric. And by the end of the evening, like, a lot of people have passed out, gotten sick in the streets, and gone home. And the people left start fighting each other. Right. And in a drunken brawl, they don't even know why they're fighting, but they're fighting. Right. And that's what the left is reminding me of. But when you look at how embedded the left is in our schools, in our colleges, in so many institutions, like, how are they going to be flushed out of there, Steve? How are they going to finally be driven from there when it looks like there's no appetite to drive them?
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Lumina Gold, ticker symbol LUM on the Toronto Venture and LMGDF on the OTC, is yet another of legendary mining investor Ross Beaty's Lumina Group. It's advancing the largest primary gold deposit in Ecuador. The resource is estimated to contain 16.7 million ounces of gold and 2.2 billion pounds of copper. At just $7 US per ounce gold equivalent, it trades at an incredible 13% of its net present value. More good news is on the way with an updated PEA study expected in Q2 of 2020. It has unparalleled infrastructure. There's grid power to camp with plentiful, inexpensive hydropower available. It's close to 2 ports and is just 8 kilometers from a paved highway. Water is plentiful. It's at low elevation, and the closest community, which is very supportive of Lumina's effort, is just a 7-kilometer ride. With all this going for it, it's likely to follow the typical Ross Beaty formula, which means big returns to shareholders. Find out more and sign up for notifications at luminagold.com. That's Lumina, Lumina gold.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I think they're killing themselves. I think the left always ends up killing itself because it's at war with reality. I mean, again, when you see this breakdown between lawmakers and lawbreakers, siding with lawbreakers, I think what you're going to want to keep an eye on is to what extent are they able to keep up the rhetoric that this tribalistic, cultural Marxist coalition of the aggrieved is all for the purpose of bettering our nation as one people. That is an old rhetoric that seems to only have sense within a civic nationalism, because you have to think in terms of some kind of nation, culture, custom, and tradition. In globalist rhetoric, it's we're all one big happy international family. That's the kind of communist rhetoric. And what we're going to find, I think, is increasingly, as we're already seeing it, increasingly Black Lives Matter protesters and activists said, no, that's not good enough. I need my own dorm. I need my own graduation ceremony. I need my own orientation ceremony. There was a fascinating study done on 150 plus colleges. I think it was 170 colleges. And they found that 40% of them had segregated dorms according to race. Another like 50% had segregated graduation ceremonies. Another 70% had segregated along racial lines of orientation programs. So we're moving ironically back to before Brown versus the Board of Education. We're moving back to this notion that if you are a different race, then we are culturally incompatible. And the left is not going to be able to hold that together. It's only going to be able to hold that together as long as the activists allow Nancy Pelosi and Chris Cuomo to hold it together. And we're finding increasingly they're telling Pelosi and Cuomo, well, you're the wrong color. Sorry, you don't have the right to tell us what to say. And so then it begins to break down into the full-blown tribalism. So I think leftism has bought into a Faustian bargain. They think that through identity politics, they're going to be able to get power. But we have to remember that Marxism is rooted in modernity. And modernity is dead. Modernity is an 18th century philosophy that says there's one size fits all political and economic system for all people, time, and places. Modernity is dead. Nobody believes that anymore. We're postmodern. And as postmoderns, we really only have two choices. We either embrace a civic nationalism that restores national sovereignty away from this dying liberal global order through border security, cultural security, economic security, or we balkanize, we tribalize. And that's what it seems the left is doing.
Yeah. So eventually the left is going to fail, just like socialism, communism, all of that always fails. The question is, are they going to take the rest of us down with them? Right.
Are they gonna go Koresh on us, or are they Saddam Hussein in 91, burning up all the oil fields? Yeah, they could. That's the scary thing. The scary thing is the left is dying all over the world, and the question is, how much of the world are they going to want to bring down with them?
Yeah, it's kind of like alcoholics. They don't just want to take themselves down. They want to take the family down with them. They want to take as many people with them as they can go, like a mad bomber.
That's right.
I'm going to die, so I'm going to kill as many people as I can. And what gets me, though, is the left are the least self-aware people on the planet here, Steve.
Right.
They don't even see the idiocy of what they're doing.
Right. Well, that's what happens when you're at war with reality. I mean, we have to remember that. Every pro-abortion argument is rooted in a pro-life reality. The person who's making the argument was born. Every alternative lifestyle sexual argument is rooted in a heterosexual reality. If that person's parents had the same opinion they did, they wouldn't exist. So they're at war with reality.
Yeah.
Reality is, and when you're at war with reality, you always ultimately lose.
Oh, you have to. You're probably going to end with some type of breakdown, some kind of psychotic break from reality, whether it's drug-induced or whatever. I think it was Andrew Breitbart who said, in order to be a liberal, there are certain things that you have to just refuse that exist. That certain things in reality that you refuse to acknowledge. And I see that because I seldom ever hear liberal argument being made on facts and statistics. And when you throw the facts and statistics at them, like the fact that the coronavirus, 8,000 people died from the flu last year or the year before in Texas. So far, 2,000 have died this year. That's something that their eyes glaze over. They're immune. So they're immune to reason. It's really like anti-rational movement.
Right. It is. It actually embraces irrationality. It's an odd thing because to be a liberal means, on the one hand, you claim to be all about science. Remember the press conferences with Fauci and all. What about the science? What about the science? And on the one hand, you're all about science. On the other hand, anything that can't be answered by science, which is a lot of things, anything that can't be answered by science, you have total and complete freedom to believe in. So they affirm scientific rationalism on the one side, and then they ironically affirm an irrationalism, something outside of rationalism on the other side, and they say that is your right to embrace that. So if you want to think you're a cow, that's your right to do that. No one has any right to tell you otherwise. So it is a belief system that overtly embraces irrationality. Whereas, as conservatives, rooted in a classical notion of the logos, we believe that in the classical, Athenian or Roman or Christian conception of things, there is a divine center by which all things cohere, and the Latin word would be the ratio. So we try to be rational with everything that we're doing. We're trying to be consistent with everything. So that's why we just squint our eyes and furrow our brows and we say, well, wait a minute now, So this mass gathering of protesters, that's COVID friendly, but then, a mass gathering of Trump rally, that's the greatest threat to the existence of humanity. How do you work that out? So not even Meghan McCain on The View is buying it. That's when it's a dead argument.
Yeah, well, like Mark Dice says, the liberal pathogen, and there's no known cure for it. How do we red pill these people? And I guess they're just going to have to kind of save themselves, I guess, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we get back to that problem, though, is like the amount of damage they'll do. In the meantime, I mean, you just look around and the riots, everything else, the undermining of the police, all these things. Who in their right mind wants to be a cop right now?
Yeah,
Who would want to do it?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, it's
exactly. God bless them too. Those who are sticking around. God bless them. They're just amazing men. Yeah, amazing guys. They're waiting for this to pass, and hopefully some sanity returns. And
we can only hope. We can only hope. So, turleytalks.com. That's your website. You've been teasing an announcement. You got something up your sleeve. You don't have to tell us what. Just when are you going to be announcing your new service here?
Yeah. We'll be announcing sometime next week a new development that I think people really going to love with the Turley Talks and with the Dr. Steve Turley YouTube channel. Yeah,
I love it. Yeah, go to the Dr. Steve Turley YouTube channel. Just put it in the search bar. It'll come right up. Have you had any issues with YouTube or other social media trying to play their games with you?
Not too much. We get demonetized fairly frequently, but just per video, but not too much in terms of. I mean, I have a very clean record, in terms of copyright strikes or videos being taken down or anything. I try to avoid. I understand they're sensitive and overly sensitive, so I'm going to try to avoid topics that would go I think would red flag me. So no, I have to say they've been okay with me.
All right. Well, that's good to hear. They can't fight the entire world. I think there's a new reality dawning there. We'll have to see what happens. Anyways, questions, comments for Dr. Steve, just email me, kl@kerrylutz.com, what you think is going to happen to these cities. Have they completely outlived their usefulness other than as cauldrons of the welfare state and all the negative and most basest elements of society? I'd like to know what you think, and let us know if you'd like to come on the show. Steve, it's always great being on with you. turleytalks.com. Make sure you check out Dr. Steve's YouTube channel, and we will talk to you again real soon, Steve.
Great. Thank you so much, Kerry.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.